I'm just going to call Shelly to make sure that he's okay because he hasn't joined yet. So I just want to check in with him. Or maybe Rosa, could you reach out to Shelly? And in the meantime, we'll get started. So welcome to everyone. Tonight's incredible speakers who are doing such great work. Members of the community board and public, we're so glad that you're with us tonight. So I'm Catherine DeLazaro. I'm the co-chair of Health and Human Services alongside Sheldon Fine, who should be with us shortly. First, I have a big and exciting announcement. I want to congratulate Rosa Arenas and Polly Spain for their new appointments in leading CB7's new environmental justice working group. Rosa and Polly are so incredibly talented and committed to this work, and we're so excited and look forward to seeing what unfolds with that environmental justice group. We want to congratulate them and also thank Stephen Brown, the chair of CB7, for prioritizing issues of equity and justice. Stephen could not be with us tonight because of an obligation as a parent. Otherwise he would be here, but we acknowledge his support and assistance with this event, and he's with us in spirit. In addition to our presenters with whom we collaborated on this event, especially the Manhattan DA's office, we thank the Borough President's office for their support and assistance with advertising the event, Rosa Arenas for assisting with the flyer and tech, and Mark Diller always for helping us with advertising and tech. We also thank Courtney for taking minutes. When we come together as a community, it's really important that all of us contribute to this being a safe, inclusive, and supportive environment for everyone. So before we start tonight's forum on hate crimes and human rights, I'm going to describe some rules and guidelines for participation and civility. For those who've heard these guidelines before, thank you for your patience and listening as we want to ensure that everyone who attends our meeting, including those who are attending for the first time, are familiar with those guidelines. First, I'm going to share some relevant sections of the bylaws. And I want to thank Susan Schwartz, the chair of the bylaws committee, for providing us with this information and making us aware. Article 1 of the bylaws calls on board members to treat others with respect and courtesy. Members are expected to treat other board members, members of the community, and representatives of agencies, elected officials, and all others with respect and courtesy while acting in their capacity as board members. Article 5 of the bylaws notes that the chairperson presiding over a committee meeting shall have the discretion to remove a member, committee member, or a member of the public from the meeting if the member is disruptive to the functioning of the meeting. In no case shall a chairperson prospectively prohibit an individual from attending a board or committee meeting. So that's kind of the foundation of our bylaws when it comes to respect and courtesy and what happens if in the case that that's not practiced. In terms of guidelines, our committee's guidelines for tonight's meeting, we're really excited to learn from the presenters and with everyone here. We encourage everyone to listen to each other in order to understand and learn more about this issue. Attendees' comments in the chat will be visible to panelists only. When the members of the public post in the chat, in other words, when members of the public post, comments will only be visible to panelists. We're a community, so let's communicate in ways that are respectful, collegial, and professional. and as much as possible that assume goodwill. This means that we focus on addressing issues or asking questions, not making any personal attacks or bullying or slandering any individual by name. It's inappropriate to speak in ways that are derogatory or negative towards whole groups. We respect and encourage diversity of perspective and opinion. Comments are most effective and easiest to understand when people speak from their own experience rather than claiming to speak for all people in the community. It's necessary for every participant to follow these guidelines in order to maintain a space that is inclusive, welcoming, and safe for everyone. No one will be interrupted or removed as they speak unless they're acting in ways that compromise these guidelines of civility. We don't expect that to happen here tonight, and we're really glad to have everyone with us for this great conversation, and we want to hear from you. In terms of the format for tonight's forum on hate crimes and human rights, Sheldon Fine will introduce our amazing speakers, each of whom will present in the order of the flyer that we distributed. Immediately following their presentations, we'll have a question and answer session. And we're especially looking forward to hearing from members of the community that are attending tonight. So immediately following the panelist presentation, we'll call on the Health and Human Services Committee members first and in alphabetical order. Then we'll open it up to board members and the public. We ask that everybody focus on asking questions in response to what the speakers share. Members of the public, please sign up to speak in the Google form that will be regularly posted in the chat. We'll let you know if there's a time limit for speaking, depending on the number who signed up. And please use your legal name in the chat and sign up sheet. So on that last note, I'm really excited to hand it over to Sheldon Fine to introduce our speakers.
Good evening. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you in advance for all the great work put together tonight's forum. This has been a 2-month process where we were really following up on our 2020 hate crimes resolution and work, and realized that we needed to engage our governmental partners and understand better and help the community understand better what is involved here. There's a lot of confusion about what hate crimes are and hate speech and other assaults upon people, whether verbal or physical. There's also very troubling, during the pandemic, there have been many groups that have experienced hate crimes in increasing numbers, and the most troubling recently, of course, has been the significant increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans. And so we didn't have that as our focus when we started this, but it certainly is something troubling to all of us and something we should all be concerned. We are so blessed to have 4 major government institutions and the representatives represented here tonight. I have to say they were amazing in their willingness to engage with the community and their desire to, okay? And I have a feeling that people assume that because government agencies are out there, that they cannot be with us here. And they very much are in their concerns and in their presence here tonight and their participation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce them, all of them, and then call on the first group. First, Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We have ADA Jean Olivo, Chief of the Hate Crimes Unit. ADA Sarah Marquez, Deputy Chief of the Hate Crimes Unit. In addition, there are other in attendance from the DA's office. Estelle Stryker Santiago, who was very accommodating to us throughout, Kevin Jean-Baptiste, Alexandria Pontios, and Alan Valerio. From the NYP Hate Crimes Unit, Sergeant Charles Sennett. And when I spoke to him, he said, sure, love to come to the community board. And he was familiar with the other agencies and looking forward to cooperating with them in this pursuit of engagement with our community. The Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes, Deborah Lauder, Executive Director, and Hassan Naveed, Deputy Executive Director, very helpful to us in bringing resources and in cooperation. And last but not least, New York City Commission on Human Rights, Ryan Dubois, Associate Human Rights Specialist. We couldn't do better in getting the best people available, and we look forward to their presentations tonight, starting with the Manhattan DA's office. Who would like to begin?
Hi, everyone. I'll begin, okay?
Yeah, sure.
So first of all, my name is Jean Olivo, and I am the Chief of the Hate Crimes Unit at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I want to thank you so much, Community Board 7, for hosting this event at a very appropriate time. And also thank you so much for having us, and I look forward to chatting with the other panelists. We do work together, as you just said, like we do know each other, we meet regularly. So let me just begin by telling you a little bit about the Hate Crimes Unit at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. The unit was founded in 2010, right after Mr. Vance became District Attorney. He is the first person to start a hate crimes unit in our office. The unit consists of myself, and I am the chief of the unit. I've been in the office for 34 years. Sarah Marquez, who is also on this and is also going to speak with me today, is also a veteran of the DA's office. She's been in the office for 11 years, and she's the deputy unit chief of the unit. We work also with an LGBT advisor, Katie Doran, who's been in the office, I think, for 33 years. And she's very instrumental in our unit. We have a full-time hate crimes analyst, Alexandria Pontios, who keeps us sane and organized and just contributes so much to this unit. And we have a retired first grade detective who we lean on sometimes to help us with work when we need it. We also work in our office with the Witness Aid Unit, and they assist in many of our cases. And we work with Estelle Stryker-Santiago, who heads up the Community Partnership Unit in our office, and she's going to speak to you about what she does, but basically that unit is the bridge between our office and the community. So I guess I should start off by saying, what is a hate crime? As you put it, a lot of people don't really know what a hate crime is. So a hate crime, it's defined in the penal law. It's section 485 of the New York State Penal Law. And a person commits a hate crime when he or she commits a specified offense and either intentionally selects a victim or intentionally commits an act in whole or in substantial part because of a belief or perception regarding the race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, religion, religious practice, age, disability, or sexual orientation, regardless of whether that belief or perception is correct. Let me just say it one more time briefly. Person commits a hate crime when he or she commits a specified offense and either intentionally selects a victim or intentionally commits an act in whole or in substantial part because of a person's identity. Okay? Now, in that you heard the word specified offense. So there needs to be a crime. There needs to be a criminal act. Not all crimes are specified offenses, but crimes like murder, menacing, assault, aggravated harassment, robbery, those are specified offenses. There are also two subsections of the hate crime section, which I just defined. You either intentionally select your victim in whole or in substantial part because of their identity, or you intentionally commit an act in whole or in substantial part. What is the difference between those two subsections? For example, a woman walking down the street wearing a burqa. A stranger approaches the woman, punches her in the face, and says, "Go back to your country, you terrorist," okay? that is an example of intentionally selecting your victim in whole or in substantial part, as opposed to intentionally committing an act. Drawing a swastika on a synagogue is intentionally committing an act. Now, I don't want to go into too much legal detail about this, but just a few things about the hate crime statute. The hate crime statute does not punish bad thoughts, nor does it punish bad speech. Everyone is entitled to their thoughts and their speech, no matter how good or no matter how bad it is. The statute punishes behavior, okay, that is based on a motive, that's based on an animus. You must again show that a defendant intentionally selected a victim or committed an act because of that animus, because of that bias. So just because a victim is part of a protected class does not automatically make a crime a hate crime, okay? And again, this is criminal law. This is not civil law. So our standard of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not, oh, that was probably a hate crime, or this looks like a hate crime, or this is possibly a hate crime. It has to be, this is a hate crime because we have the evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So what are some of the things we look for in determining whether something is or is not a hate crime? Well, we look at a motive or a lack of motive. We look at whether or not it's a senseless crime where somebody assaults somebody out of the clear blue. No, as opposed to, let's just say, a neighbor assault, where neighbors have been bickering for years over noise or garbage, and they get into an assault one day, and during that assault, bad language is used. Okay, that would not be a hate crime typically, okay? But again, when somebody punches somebody for no reason, that would be evidence of like a motiveless crime, and we would look at that. Also, we look at behavior and words used before, during, and after the event, okay? Were slurs used? Were slurs used before, during, after? We also look at an offender's background, social media feeds. Are you posting social media feeds? You know, are you members of organizations? Do you have tattoos? Are you affiliated with extremist groups or hateful groups? So I think that I explained pretty clearly what a hate crime is and is not, but it does become very confusing because people get confused if someone is just, like, let's just say a victim is standing on a street and someone comes up to her and calls her a name. That would not be a hate crime. There's no crime committed. There's no offense that's been committed. Okay, but if it does happen where there's an offense and it's based upon an animus, then we would consider it a hate crime. So how do you report a hate crime? If you're a victim of a hate crime or if you are a witness to a hate crime, it's important that you call 911. A local police officer will respond in the local precinct. If the facts are given to the police officer accurately, they will then contact the Hate Crimes Task Force, who is in on this forum with us tonight. I know Sergeant Charlie Sanat is on. I believe Inspector Jessica Corey might be on. These are fabulous people. Once they get notified, pretty much we get notified, and we all work together to make sure that we are building a case and make sure that we are gathering all the right evidence. You can also go to your community leaders. We all have hotlines that you can reach out to. But again, these cases are very challenging, but they're very important. And we need to all work together, especially during these times, which are just so challenging to us all, but we all need to report and we need to work together. And I'm now going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about whatever I forgot to talk about and to talk about some sentencing as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So just to kind of explain how the sentencing works, and this is assuming, we've investigated and done the things Jean just described and determined that someone should be charged with a hate crime. Essentially, it's what is often referred to as a bump up. So, for example, the crime of assault in the 3rd degree is an A misdemeanor. If it was charged as assault in the 3rd degree as a hate crime, it would become an E felony. And that's how that works. So whatever the level of the crime is, it gets bumped one level up, and then the sentencing for that higher level is what would be applied. In terms of what we do and what we recommend in terms of sentences, there's a wide range of things. Sometimes we recommend jail or prison. Sometimes we recommend mental health treatment. Sometimes, and I think this is something we're starting to do more as we've developed a unit in our office, we will do restorative justice, where we try to do education and engage the person in those kinds of things to help them kind of learn about the situation and how not to do it again, and also to bring the victim in or a community member in place of the victim to kind of explain and be present for that process. So those are all of the things we do, and it's really a lot based on information we might find out about the offender in terms of mental health issues or substance abuse issues, or all of those things are what we take into account. Did I miss anything, Jeannie?
I think you got it. I think Estelle wants to speak too.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry. I'm a few minutes late. I was coming from another community meeting. I really don't need to add too much other than I'm here with Alan Valerio. We're from the Community Partnerships Unit. And this is what we do. We set up opportunities with the community to talk about anything that is of concern to the community. And obviously right now, hate crimes is a big concern. So we thank our colleagues from the DA's office and the other agencies that are here to provide this conversation with all of you. And we look forward to working closely with you on this and any other issues that come up. I believe, hopefully many of you know Alan, who is our liaison to your community. And it's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay. We thank you very much, and there'll be questions later. We're going to have each presenter. Next in line, Sergeant Charles Sinat, New York Police Department Hate Crimes Unit, who I have the privilege to speak to personally.
Can you hear me?
Very clear.
All right, good night, everyone. Thank you, Community Board 7, for having us. I'm Sergeant Charlie Sinat. I'm accompanied by my new commanding officer, Deputy Inspector Jessica Corey. Hello, members of the panel. Hello, Jeannie. Hello, guys over there. I'm Charlie. We're assigned to the NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force Unit. We're the #1 advocate for hate crime victims when it comes to arrests and prosecutions in the city. We cover all 5 boroughs, and we're responsible for the criminal investigation and the apprehension of perpetrators who commit hate crimes in New York City. We are also responsible for the citywide hate crime statistics that are shared with all these units and the city and state of New York. I'm going to introduce you to Inspector Corey. She's going to say hello, and I'm going to pretty much double down on pretty much what Jeannie said. We investigate these crimes for 2 possible reasons. A, we're trying to apprehend the suspect who committed this crime, and our detectives have the extra job of trying to identify if this person committed this crime based on hate of the 10 protected classes. We confer with the DA's office on apprehension processes and how we're going to go about developing probable cause and if this crime was indeed motivated by hate. Inspector?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Just wanted to jump in with Charlie. I know Charlie had this scheduled. Just introduce myself again, Deputy Inspector Jessica Corey. I've been doing the job for a few weeks now, so I'm getting acclimated and doing a lot of work with all the other participants that are on. Obviously, right now we have a serious issue with the particularly anti-Asian hate crime, which we are addressing in every way that we can, including encouraging people to please report. Encourage people to report, call 911, and we will investigate, and we will vigorously investigate. We have some of the NYPD has the greatest detectives in the world, and some of the best are right here in this unit. So, and hi Estelle, who I haven't seen in a long time. So it's good to hear your voice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice has an Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. Okay. And it oversees the, all of the contracts the City Council allocates to groups that help with these issues citywide. I believe there are 15. And from the Office of Prevention, we have Deborah Lauder, the Executive Director, and Hassan Naveed, Deputy Executive Director. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the invitation from Community Board 7. I have to tell you, when I first saw the resolution that you passed in December, I was like, this is so fantastic. It was just to see a community board take the initiative and put together such a thoughtful piece. So I saw that Mark Diller's on. I think he was chair of Community Board 7 at that point. I want to just compliment you for your leadership there, and to thank Catherine and Sheldon for putting this together. You should be proud. You really do have the A-team of all the folks in the city who are working together to prevent hate. So I am here with my colleague Hassan Naveed. We're going to show you some slides. It's part of a presentation we put together to explain to the city agencies and community boards and others what we do, because we're the new kid on the block. We were actually formed just 18 months ago. So this is very short part of the presentation. We selected some slides out, but just know that if you did want to delve further, we do have this presentation that usually takes 45 minutes. So we were given about 15 minutes for tonight. I don't even know if we'll use that amount of time, but we hope it's helpful. So about the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crime, as I mentioned, we're only 18 months old. We were launched at a period when crime was going down, was going up down in New York City, except for in the field of hate crimes. And it was mostly because of the escalation of anti-Semitic hate crimes. I think many of you remember that period. It's pretty distressful. City Council passed legislation to create this office, and the mayor launched us in September 2019. I was fortunate to go through the interview process and get selected to direct the office. We have a staff of 7 fantastic professionals from a wide variety of fields. We're a very diverse group. They've been incredibly, during this year, challenging to really be committed to this work. So you just heard from NYPD and the DA's office. That's the law enforcement branch of hate crimes. We look more at what we can do outside the structures of law enforcement itself. So what we've done is we looked at all the different city agencies. You can go to the next slide. That have anything to do with hate crimes. And we now have at the table 18 different city agencies. Clearly NYPD and all 5 DA's offices sit at the table with us. But all the other agencies, some you would guess would be there, right? The Department of Education, the City Commission on Human Rights, who you'll be hearing from later today, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. But we also put, the Parks and Rec together because, that's where you often will see swastikas or nooses. The DOHMH, you heard Jeannie and Sarah talk about mental health issues of perpetrators. We thought it was important to have DOHMH at the table with us. So what we do is we convene these agencies regularly, and we have them all now working in working groups that you see listed here. There's youth education, neighborhood safety and community relations, victim support. You heard from Sarah about restorative justice. What can the city do now specifically for hate crime perpetrators to keep them out of the criminal justice system, but still have an impact? And then strategies to enhance reporting, which is a major problem with hate crimes, and we'll go into. Next slide. So the way I've organized the office is under a very simple principle, right? There's not one way to fight hate. you have to do it through a multi-pronged approach. And what we are looking at now, we strategically look at 3 pillars. One is education. These are resources, and I know your resolution specifically called on the city to create curricula for students. We are doing that as we speak. We are going to launch this fall a fantastic curriculum for middle and high school students, specifically focused on hate crime prevention. We developed during the wave of anti-Semitic incidents, a whole curricular resource for educators about anti-Semitism and how they can talk to their kids about it. And this past year, we developed one on anti-Asian hate. And I'm very pleased that the new Chancellor, Chancellor Porter, we updated it, and she just re-released that for all the middle and high school principals to be using. So that's incredibly important, and we're very proud of that. You can see here on the screen, we partnered with the Department of Children and Community, DYCD. They did a Heroes Against Hate comic book program for their youth, and we had them focus on the theme of hate. We did a art contest this summer for kids, focusing on on how they could prevent hate. And we maintain a youth leadership council of high school students who have been incredibly helpful, advising us on our curriculum, giving us good feedback, so we know that we'll be solid. So, you know, for me, education is a key part of how do you prevent hate. The second pillar is community relations. It's what you all are doing. It's inviting us to these programs. I think I've lost track of how many town hall programs we've done, but it's incredibly important for those of us who work in hate crime prevention to get out to the communities, to talk to them about the importance of reporting. We do all kinds of programs to get people to explore diverse relationships. Last week, I was privileged to moderate a panel with Cardinal Dolan, Rabbi Buckdahl from Central Synagogue, Rabbi Potasnik from the New York Board of Rabbis, Reverend Bernard, who has one of the largest megachurches in New York, and 2 of the leading Asian American pastors in the city. And those kinds of programs are really critically important, not only for them to make a statement about standing up against AAPI hate, but also for them to figure out their future programming of how they're going to maybe do some congregation exchanges and whatnot. So community relations, incredibly important. The picture you see up on the screen is one program that Project Witness did. They're a group that does Holocaust education. They brought their programming, a Holocaust survivor, into a school. This was in Brooklyn. It was a very powerful program. Next slide. The third is the law enforcement, and you've heard that piece, but our piece of it is we don't do any kind of investigation, but by law, we are required now to do a hate violent notification system. So when NYPD and the Hate Crime Task Force determines there has been a violent hate crime, they send us a notification, and we then send notice out to elected officials and community organizations and to all the community boards. So you should be receiving those. I wish I could say not very frequently, but unfortunately there's, because the number of incidents, we only send it when it's been deemed a violent hate crime, but it's been really, I think, a helpful system for people to understand what's going on and to be able to get more information about situations. So those are the three pillars of what we do. I know that Jeannie Oliva went over what is a hate crime. Here it is up on the screen for those of you who like to see the actual definition. This is from, as she said, Penal Code 485 that defines it. And I'm going to turn it over to Hassan to take you through the last few slides here. Hassan?
Thank you so much, Deborah. And hello, folks. Good evening. Hassan Naveed, Deputy Executive Director. And so we got a great definition of what is a hate crime prior. And so I will continue onwards. Now, in terms of hate crimes, these are obviously situations that end up really impacting communities as well, beyond just the victim itself. And we've seen through the course of a lot of the anti-Asian incidents, the amount of pain, but grief also that's impacted communities through all this. So when we look at hate crimes, we're obviously looking at it in terms of a comprehensive way. Obviously, we want to be able to address the victim and the incident they're going through, but also the community sort of grief and pain in this as well. And at the same time, we acknowledge that hate crimes can also really target multiple aspects of a person's really complex identity, right? Folks are not just one person, one sort of identity. They encompass a lot, right? Whether they're both, for example, who we put down openly gay and Muslim, or undocumented, and from a particular community of color, for example. And to look at some of like the reporting hate crime aspect, and this is sort of a quick rundown on our data, but this is mostly of last year. So I will put that up there so folks can kind of have an idea that we did see an increase. This year, obviously, we've seen a decrease in hate crimes overall. But that, does provide, we have to look at some of the context as to why that may be happening, right? It could also be something in relation to the pandemic, right? Folks are mostly indoors. There hasn't been a lot of activity outside, but we have obviously seen an increase in those COVID-related hate crimes that end up impacting Asian New Yorkers and Asian communities across the city. One particular sort of limitation in data that we're quite I'll go back to that slide in a bit, that we're quite, is an important thing to mention, is underreporting, right? And so, well, what is underreporting, right? And underreporting is something that really does impact many communities, and especially those that are the most vulnerable, right? There are barriers at times to reporting. And some of the examples that we provide here in which, a person, may not necessarily know where to report a hate crime, may feel comfortable reporting a hate crime to a particular agency or whatever it might be, and may be concerned about their privacy, right? This may, if they're, for example, part of the LGBTQ community, that might be something that could out them, right? And so these are things that we're very, conscious of in the efforts that we're working towards in working with some of these vulnerable populations. The numbers we see now obviously are a snapshot to what could possibly be even more that's out there, right? And so we're really aware and trying to ensure that we're meeting communities where they're at with that data. And so to kind of go back to the original slide, there is, and Deborah brought this up earlier about our violent hate crime notification system, right? And so there, is obviously a difference between the violent hate crimes and those that are nonviolent. And this kind of gives you an idea of what are some of the nonviolent violent offenses, and also the communities that are impacted by itself. By themselves as well, right? And so we see, for example, that this is number from 2020. We can see that the anti-Asian incidents, were 20% of the total, and we're 30, right? And so that was only just a part of the year, and we've seen that now, obviously it's continued onwards. And so the Commission on Human Rights is going to probably go over this in a little bit later on, but this bias incidents obviously are an aspect within the larger sort of prevention of hate crimes, and so that is defined as an act of prejudice that is not a hate crime, that does not involve violence, threats, and property damage. And an example of that is if a restaurant owner tells a Jewish customer that particular stuff, that could be obviously something we encourage folks to call the Commission on Human Rights or dial 311 and ask for the Commission on Human Rights as well. And so that concludes our sort of rough overview, and I'll pass it back to Deborah. Please, Deborah.
Sure. Thank you, Hassan. So as I said, this is just a glimpse at some of the presentation that we do. I hope it was helpful. But we very much look forward to your questions. I think you'll see the complete picture after CCHR presents. This is not an easy area. As Jeannie said, it's often difficult sometimes for people to understand the distinction between bias incidents and hate crimes. But the bottom line message for me is that we want people to feel safe and supported, and that they get and deserve the kind of support from city agencies. We are all, I know you're saying you're taking your time, we are all people who live in New York City, care deeply about the city, and we want to make sure it's a good, safe place for all. So we appreciate again, Community Board 7 taking the time to focus on this issue tonight. Thank you, Sheldon. I think you're on mute.
Charlie, you got to unmute.
Thank you. So, well, thank you again. There was reference just now to the Commission on Human Rights, and we're fortunate tonight to have Ryan Dubois, the Associate Human Rights Specialist from the Human Rights Commission of New York City. Welcome. Is Ryan there?
I'm not sure I see him. Ryan Dubois?
Okay. Okay, if he appears, we'll double back. Okay, we'll try to contact him by email and see what's going on. Thank you. In that case, we're going to begin our question and answer period. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, we're going to start with members of the committee who may or may not want to present the question. We're going to go in alphabetical order by first name. So Audrey Isaacs, do you have a question? Okay. If not, Catherine.
I do have a question. As we are conducting research for the hate crimes resolution, I studied the reporting, the NYPD's reporting of hate crimes over the last at least 10 years. And I noticed that there's an increase, seems like a pretty dramatic increase over the last decade in the category of rape. So I was wondering if one or multiple panelists could kind of address that and explain that. And I'm sure it went up in other categories too. I just remember noticing that one.
Catherine, were you saying that the category you saw the trend line was on race?
It was on rape.
On rape.
Sexual assault, rape. So I don't know if the NYPD wants to address that because they report it, and if the DA's office wants to address that at all about the increase in rape over the last 10 years.
So the question is, you're asking about specifically about rape, the crime of rape, not related to hate crime?
Hate crimes. So in the hate crime reporting, as we were doing research for the resolution that we wrote, I noticed that there's been a pretty consistent increase over time in reports of hate crimes in the category of rape. And so I'm wondering if there's any explanation for that, if there's been any work directed at preventing or reducing that. I'm just wondering about that category.
So I'm not aware of the category of rape with hate crimes, if there's any. I mean, there aren't any this year. I don't know of any. So we'd have to maybe talk offline about that. I don't know what you're looking at. So, you'd have to share that with us where you're getting that from.
Okay, I don't see, for some reason, I can't see who's speaking.
Deputy Inspector Jessica Corey.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I just couldn't see. Okay, so maybe I can share the data with you that I found, and then we could talk about that.
Sure, I'm not really sure what you're referring to, so absolutely, please do.
It's when it's the information that's reported to the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
There's categories, but I'll find it and share it. Maybe I can even find it right now and post it on the chat.
And Catherine, I can tell you that in the 5 years that I've been doing hate crimes, we have never charged it in New York County.
Oh, so maybe it was New York State.
Right, it has not been charged in Manhattan. since 2015.
Okay, okay, all right.
It's actually a fascinating area because gender, as you saw, is one of the categories of protected classes. And there has been a lot more discussion recently about that intersection between violence against women and whether it was motivated in whole or substantial part by animus against a woman, would that then lead to enhanced penalties? So I think in the coming years, we're going to see more attention paid to it. It was kind of controversial when the hate crime laws were first passed at the federal level, but they are in there and they are in New York state law. So,
And I'll look for the link and post it in the chat.
Okay, Courtney, you have a question? Okay, again, not required.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute myself, but I'm good because I'm taking minutes tonight, so I'm trying to keep up. There's so much great information.
Thank you for that important job. Okay, thank you. Madge?
Yes, sorry to be a little myopic, but are there any statistics about our particular district and whether things have been gotten worse or better, or what's happening here locally? And anybody who wants to answer, that's fine.
Charlie?
So first of all, we don't have it broken down by district. We have Manhattan North itself. And Manhattan North, we're at 11 versus 12, down 1 or minus 8% for the year.
Is that's percentage?
I'm sorry?
That's an actual numbers?
So the actual numbers are 11 versus 12, down 1 or minus 8% for the year.
Okay.
Thank you.
But that's all of Manhattan North, everything above 59th Street in Manhattan.
Okay. Okay, Robert.
All right, thank you, Shelley. My question is in two parts, and one is on numbers, and then I'm glad the Attorney General's office is here, because one would, I think, fit into the category, my category of problems in prosecution. The first question is, what are the numbers of assaults by people with mental illness? The second part of the question is that given mental illness and the question that arises of awareness of one's conduct, whether it's based on volitional behavior or psychiatrically based behavior, do we decide it's a psychiatric symptom of carrying out and creating and becoming violent as they would in any other situation? Of course, in this situation, you have the turbulence of homelessness and pandemic and so on, and a dearth of psychiatric services. So how do you prosecute that with a person with psychiatric illness when the doors are for that level of care, which is not the person living in a community residential program? And for your information, I worked in that in many, many years, for many years. You're talking about people who belong in hospitals that for whom there are no longer beds, and they're living on the street, and they're symptomatic, and they're schizophrenic, and they have converging diagnoses, bipolarity, schizophrenia, paranoia, they go together. And then you compress them into a subway system, and then you, so I'm not absolving, I'm saying, how do you prosecute that? And how do you define that? And if, at least impressionistically, 90% of these assaults are being carried out by people who are psychiatrically ill. It's the Asian man the other night, he was sitting right across from him. How are you going to suspect that someone's going to suddenly stand up and punch you in the face and send you to the hospital to the acute care unit? How can you prepare for that? How can you prepare? You're standing on a platform and someone's simply going to push you under, an oncoming train. This is a systemic malady. This is a grand malaise, as it were, of the system, where people who should be under severe care have no care. They're put in shelter. They could be put in Ward's Island. They can put anywhere. These are very sick people. So they go out and they commit these extraordinary violent acts. And then we say that they're going to get the add-on because their hate crime, as a hate crime, gets a SIR sentence added to it. So how does that work? How does that remedy? I guess that's the word I'm looking for. How does that remedy the crises of mental health services that we have?
Okay. Complicated question.
Well, yeah, Shelley, it is.
Yeah.
So let me just say a few things just to start out. I mean, we have a mental health court in our office, and if a defense attorney wants a mental health court to hear a case and certain requirements are met, the case can go into mental health court. All right. Having said that, someone's mental health, that's a defense to a crime, right? We have to keep the public safe. So if an offender commits an offense, he's arrested, and we have to keep the public safe, correct? Now, if he's mentally ill, his defense attorney can opt to assert a psychiatric defense on his behalf, or we can try to work together and get the offender the mental health treatment that he or she needs. But you are correct. The last month, I mean, it's just overwhelming. Many of the offenders who have been arrested have severe mental health issues. Severe mental health issues. They have been arrested. They are now being evaluated, all right, by the experts in the field. And their defense attorneys will choose the best course moving forward. If they choose to assert, again, a psychiatric defense, the case can go one way. Or if they choose to enter mental health court, it can go another way. But there is always the interest where we have to protect the public at large as well. And that's very difficult. And I don't have the answers to that question.
Well, no,
I did.
Yeah, the answer is long term, but part of in the mix is the nuance, and that what you're describing, we understand, that's per incident, where in fact the remedy has to be really systemic. And until we deal with inpatient psychiatric services, then we're going to find an increase of this sort of thing. It's just terrible. It's really, it's terrible.
So many times though, like we cannot force an offender to stay on their medication. We cannot force an offender to get the mental health treatment that he or she needs. We can't force an offender into a facility. So this is where it becomes very disturbing. And that's where we in the DA's office try to work together with the defense attorneys to come to like the right solution, to come to like what is best here, what is best for the offender, what is best to protect the public. I mean, so and that's where we do work together. And that's where, that's where the criminal justice system, in my opinion, thrives, when everybody's working together to do the right thing.
I couldn't catch up with the list of cooperating agencies.
Robert, I just want to interject, Robert.
Is the New York State Office of Mental Health on that list that you posted early in the presentation?
Yeah, so the list I posted was city agencies and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, as well as Thrive, do sit at the table with us.
Okay.
Robert, you're absolutely right. This is one of the issues that we see raised over and over again, particularly the DA's offices. We've had discussions among all of them that they're frustrated, exactly for what Jean just said. So one of our working groups within the concept of restorative justice, we are dealing with that. And I I really hope that we can make some recommendations for how the city can do better in this area. You put your finger right on it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much to Robert for bringing up that issue and for the answers to that. Shelley, if I could just interject.
Please.
I want to encourage everyone. Rosa and Mark have been helpfully encouraging people to sign up to speak in the chat. So we really want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. So please sign up. And I want to welcome, and I'm so happy to see Councilmember Helen Rosenthal. Thank you for joining us. And I want to know if you have any comments you'd like to share.
Thank you, Catherine. This is an extraordinary panel, so congratulations to the community board for doing this. Very thorough. If I could just sort of make two very quick points. First of all, Madge, in response to your question about local hate crime, it's been, the only ones I've heard about are anti-Semitic. The community has been very responsive in supporting, our synagogues. But they're very infrequent. Sometimes there's graffiti. But I really want to get back to Catherine's point about whether or not rape is a hate crime. And, it may be the case that the way the law is written, that it's not considered a hate crime. And, I'm not a lawyer. I didn't write this law. I don't have any control over what's in it. But I am, there is a undercurrent among some groups who advocate on behalf of women that no one is really talking about this horrible set of murders as in terms of the victims. These victims were all women, except for two. One person there is a massage. But the perpetrator said, I have a sex addiction. And that's why I did it. And what I find so frustrating is, why can't we talk about the intersectionality of how society can, I don't know what the words are, talk about Asian women as exotic, and this particular crime, these particular women, we don't know whether or not they were sex workers. We don't know whether or not they were, in a horrible situation. But the guy said, I have a sex addiction. And I really do think that, over the last few years, the concerns for women are being subjugated to concerns for race and ethnicity. And I'm all in for race and ethnicity, but we need to take the time to recognize the intersectionality of all of this. I just wanted to shine a spotlight on what Catherine is saying. Rapes are up. We don't know why. Is it because of the Me Too movement? Is it because people are more comfortable coming forward? But I'll tell you this thing, and for all of you who have seen me at hearings with the NYPD, I don't believe the NYPD does a particularly good job thinking about sexual assault survivors. And I just didn't want to, again, have Catherine's point swept under the rug. it's just, but that's my 2 cents as chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, who's been trying to get the NYPD to have some trauma-informed care for assault survivors. So, I mean, you know, if you have to, at the hate crimes unit, you know, fall into a very narrow window, a very narrow box, if you're confined by that, I think that's interesting. I would want to go back and tweak the law to get you out of that box. I do think it would be worth your while to consider rape, which primarily is a crime perpetrated on women, although in the LGBT community, you know, we have a lot of instances of rape and we're doing a lot of work there too, but we can't be dismissive of rape as a hate crime. It is a hate crime. So my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Rosenthal, for those helpful comments. I know that gender-based violence is included, and maybe one of the speakers can clarify rape. I noticed it within the data on hate crimes, but maybe someone can clarify that. I also just want to make the comment that, as stated in the beginning of the meeting, if any person is making derogatory comments or negative comments about groups, they will be removed from the meeting according to our guidelines. And at least one person has been removed for that reason. So if anyone notices comments in the chat that I or Sheldon find this, please alert us. And because that kind of commentary will not be tolerated for any reason. So I don't know if I don't know if NYPD or the DA's office or anyone else wants to respond to some of Helen's really helpful comments, and thank you again.
Okay. I'm going to progress to Rosa, if you have a question.
Hi, thank you for this great forum. I wonder what resources undocumented persons have. I know somebody talked about that briefly, maybe Hassan, and I know that you mentioned underreporting as well. So what are the options for undocumented persons? I assume that they're the most frightened and the least likely to report.
I can just start off by saying that we have services in our office. We treat everybody the same. In fact, if you're the victim or if you're a witness, we can actually help you get a U visa. So we have a lot of support services in our office for undocumented folks. They should never feel, you know, afraid to come to our office. We are a safe space.
Reach out in other languages. Sorry to add another.
We can get interpreters for every language. Yes, we have all of that. We have a Spanish language unit in the Manhattan DA's office, and we have interpreters that are on call to us 24 hours a day.
Thank you for that question, Rosa. A really important question, especially as diverse as our city is, and especially a city of immigrants, obviously. This is something that, you know, is a really important sort of angle for us here. And we do work with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs on this interagency committee to be able to reach out to many of these communities that are undocumented who may not feel comfortable reporting. And the resource that we provide, we've done resources in multiple languages. And I put a link earlier in the chat box, but I'll do it again. That really provides information on what a hate crime is, what a bias incident is, what the difference of those are, right? As well as various organizations that do provide services within our community advisory committee that we run, that particularly cater to undocumented communities as well. And so I'll put that in the inbox itself, and you can see that if you look at our resource page, you'll see that there's, you know, a lot of our resources are in multiple languages. And so you can click on those and those will be able to be downloaded. And we, at the same time, when it comes to, you know, our events and such, we have done town halls with communities, specific communities, in their languages. So language, it's like simultaneous translation. And actually many of the people on this call have also participated in those town halls to be able to provide information on what resources, services, the very basics of hate crimes that are available. And those are posted on some of the websites for these, for the agents, for our group interagency effort. And I'll post those in the chat box as well. And again, when it comes to immigration status, we are a sanctuary city, right? And when it comes to undocumented communities, that is in no way a barrier for anyone to be able to get help. And so we encourage communities themselves to obviously call 911. Language services are available in those at the 911 centers itself. And at the same time, I'll let NYPD speak to this. We have an Asian hate crime task force that has multiple languages, on top of the fact that the agency itself, NYPD, has several as well. So, you know, we are obviously very, very responsive to many of the trending issues that, you know, that go on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good question. Sarah Lynn?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much to all the panelists. It was really informative and great to hear from you, and thank you for the work that you do. I know that we touched on this, so it can be short, but I was just wondering if maybe Deborah or others could just speak quickly a little bit more about the restorative justice practices and how those are working and if they do seem to work. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're in the phase where this working group has been meeting and coming up with recommendations. We've seen some models that have been effective, particularly with youth. So for example, the Brooklyn DA's office, when there was a rash of swastika vandalism and they apprehended, they were middle schoolers, they had them go to the Jewish Heritage Museum and really kind of learn about what is the meaning of a swastika. They knew they were doing something bad, but they didn't understand the context and the impact it had. So that's one model. I know up in the Bronx, there was an incident with 3 teenagers on a bus that assaulted an elderly Asian woman. And they worked, I was able to bring the OCA, it's an Asian advocacy organization, together with the Family Justice Center, and they created a restorative justice program incorporating those young girls, and apparently it was incredibly successful. Those girls will never commit a hate crime again. They really understood. But those are I think the good outcomes, and we want to look at how can we scale those kinds of programs up. So we're not there yet, but there's a lot of focus. The Office for Administrative Trials and Hearings, OATH, is also a part of our interagency committee, and they're very, their specialty is in conflict circles, restorative justice, and so their voice is going to be really important in the next coming years on that issue. So thank you for the questions.
Thank you for the work. Thank you.
And if I can just,
Jeannie, you want to add? I know you're doing some good stuff in Manhattan DA's office.
the restorative justice is probably one of the most rewarding things being in hate crimes. Katie, who has been doing this since 2010, and I jumped on in 2015, but to really see restorative justice, like to see, there used to be the Museum of Tolerance that was in Midtown Manhattan. And actually, Katie was present where offenders actually took place with their victims, and they went through a program together, and they understood the history of hate and how hate affects not just victims but entire communities, and where there's actually a facilitated dialogue taking place between the offender and the victim. And I remember a case not too long ago. It was around the time when Paris was bombed, and there was he was a union worker who was out of work for a little while, and he was like stuck in his home. He was watching CNN over and over, and he was just watching television of the Paris bombings. And he ended up going to a Christmas party in the city, and he went to a pizzeria afterwards, and he just like flipped out on the people in the pizzeria, and he started calling them all Muslims and terrorists, and he just destroyed the pizzeria. And he was so ashamed. I mean, after he was arrested and after he was charged with crimes, I mean, he was so ashamed of his behavior, and he begged for forgiveness, and he wanted to apologize, and he wanted to pay, and he was just ashamed. And it was a first arrest. And to see that kind of justice restored and to see that is, it's what makes hate crimes. It's just to really see the positive part of hate crimes. I just wanted to share that. That's all.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is, I know I mentioned earlier that we're working on a hate crime curriculum for students. We're infusing one of the chapters on restorative justice techniques, so that when there's incidents in schools, whether it's bullying or racist graffiti or whatever, that instead of the kid being suspended, that the school can then engage in restorative justice circles to do exactly what Jane just said, that you have the victim talking about, why they acted out this way, and what they experience as a victim, and the perpetrator talking, hearing that voice. So I'm real optimistic that we can make an impact on kids with this kind of framework as well. So.
Okay, it's great to hear about educational initiatives, particularly for children and restorative justice. I had there are a number of people who are attending tonight who normally don't come to the community board because they were excited about this issue and this topic. But one of them said to me this afternoon, you go into a restaurant and other places and you see a poster about the Heimlich maneuver, and it shows how it's done. But I don't see posters anywhere about if you see or experience a hate crime, what to do. The only place I saw this in any way was in schools in 2008, 2009, where they had respect for others. And so respect for all, and posters all over the place. And it was a help, I guess. Some kids may have responded to it. What about the rest of society? Is there anything that I don't know about, or that we could do on kiosks, on posters, on public service announcements, in the taxis, in the New York One, okay? So that people are, one, aware of what a hate crime is, and simply 1 or 2 or 3 things to do in case of you experience this or you see someone committing a crime like this.
Shelley, we have, I think all the members of the committee were able to speak, and we have Natasha and Ken, and I think Richard had his hand up, but he seems to be gone, and also Doug. And then we have about 4 or 5 members of the public who are steadily signing up to speak as well.
Okay, great.
Could I actually just speak to a couple of the things?
Please.
We have a pamphlet on hate crimes, and I know that the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes has literature as well, the website. We have our Twitter, which is at NYPD Hate Crimes. So people can follow us on Twitter. We encourage you to do so. We're also in the process of translating the hate crime flyer into multiple languages, Chinese, Korean, I believe Tagalog. So we're going to be putting out more information. We're also looking at doing some type of posters for stores. And additionally, the MTA has put signage now down into the transit system as well.
That's great.
And also, on the other, about calling 911 or about translators, every New York State police officer has the ability to contact language line right from their department's cell phone. So anyone can do any type of interpretation right on the street with the language line. If people call 911, I think there's over 240 languages that are spoken that we are able to connect people to. One of the things that we've started to tell people is to make sure if you have family, friends, loved ones that may not speak English, that they know at least the English name for the language that they do speak, or the dialect, for instance, of Chinese that they speak, to say Mandarin, to say Cantonese or Fukienese, and then understand that there'll be just a slight delay while they're connected to the language line interpreter. But we find that's really helpful. So we just want to get that message out there as well.
Okay, great.
Shelley, that was a phenomenal question, because we have, our office as well as other city agencies have put out information on the way that bystanders can intervene in these sort of situations. It's called Bystander Intervention. And there are these sort of 5 Ds that exist. And I have to credit Hollaback, which is an organization that has put those forward. And just to give you just a rough what those 5 Ds are, and I encourage folks to actually, I'm going to put I put the information on the Stop Asian Hate Toolkit in the chat that has information on bystander intervention and links to it as well on what, you know, we could do, what a person could do if they see that something is happening. What are some steps that they can take? And obviously you want to be conscious of your own safety and security in those situations as well. And those 5 Ds, just to quickly, go for it's distract. Obviously you want to de-escalate the situation by distracting the perpetrator in this situation, right? Delegate, get help from somebody else. There's also document. It's important to be able to document this information as well. It could be helpful for law enforcement, for folks to have that information. Delay, ways, if the incident is over, check in with the person who has been harassed, who's been, in that unfortunate situation, and then also direct too, right? And that is really taking the approach of directly, again, it all depends on the safety and security of oneself and intervening in that, right? Can you speak up in those situations to stop and advocate for that person? These are tactics that are used at community organizations. They've been pushed by communities themselves. Our office, in conjunction with a variety of CBOs throughout the city, have done trainings that really provide folks with information on how they can be upstanders in these sorts of instances, right? And so we've done those in multiple languages, and I imagine there'll be more to come. I do want to credit an organization called the Center for Anti-Violence Education. They do these trainings fairly often for the public as well. And so the information of a lot of that is in the Stop Asian Hate Toolkit. I will also provide information on those 5 Ds that Hollaback has put out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Catherine, could you just give me the list in order? The first one was Natasha.
Yes, Natasha, and then I would say Ken, and then Doug, and if Richard comes back on.
Ken, Doug, and Richard. Okay, Natasha.
Hi. Thank you to all the speakers who are here. This was a very good presentation. I have a question about finances. I realize that this is a time of financial distress and austerity for the city. And in some cases, budgets have been actively slashed in different agencies. And I was wondering if everybody, all the agencies that are present today, if somebody could speak from each of them about the resources that they have on hand, whether it's money or manpower, and whether they believe those resources are adequate for them to function. Thank you.
Who wants to say they have too much?
Listen, well, for me, you can never have too much money in the fight against hate, right? So, I will tell you what happened that was upsetting. When our Office for the Prevention of Hate Crime was formed, City Council at the same time allocated about $1 million to something called the Hate Violence Prevention Initiative. And the money went directly into community-based organizations. There were 16 of them. Our office oversaw the grants, and we convened those groups together. It was a really kind of got us off the ground and really in touch with the grassroots. Unfortunately, because of COVID and the economic crisis, Natasha, that money did not get renewed by City Council. So we nevertheless asked them to stay at the table with us. We actually expanded the number of organizations. There's now 30 of them at the table with us. because interestingly enough, Asian organizations had not been part of the HVPI program. And now they're at the table. We just convene them, we convene quarterly. So my hope is that now, in light of what's been happening and so much attention on hate crimes, that the city will be able to invest more money in this, because it's just like healthcare, right? If you put money in up front to prevent, then you don't have to deal with the back end. So that's our hope.
And I just wanted to add that, like, this money is really focused on community building, right? It's focused on really working towards non-law enforcement intervention, right? In the sense of, like, you know, educational stuff, initiatives, and communities also defining what safety looks like for them and how they can go about really advocating for that safety. And so that pot of community money is so important to be able to get to communities, to be able to come up with that programming, to be able to push out that sort of stuff, right? And it was unfortunate that, you know, it didn't renew. So.
Thank you. Okay, Ken?
Yeah, first I wanted to welcome Deputy Inspector Corey back to the Upper West Side. She was the commanding officer of the Central Park Precinct up until about 6 years ago. And she was terrific, so hi. And my question is, do we have statistics on the scope of the anti-Asian American hate crimes in the past year? And what is being done to address that particular hate crime?
So right now for this year to date, we have 26 as of today versus 0 last year at this time. And I say 0 because there's a difference the way they reported the COVID related ones and straight up anti-Asian. So, but as of last year, I think as the COVID related, as of last year at this time, there were 7 COVID related and there were 0 non-COVID related anti-Asian. And there were 2 COVID related this year and 26 anti-Asian. So one of the things I just want to add is, as of today, we have 2 additional detectives coming into our unit. They're going to have different days off, so they're going to really be on pretty much, you know, whenever they're not on vacation or other, they'll be here. And they both were born. One was born in China, one was born in Hong Kong. One didn't come here until he was 15 years old. And he served in the Marine Corps, and he was like an interpreter for the Department of Defense. He speaks Cantonese and Mandarin. The other speaks, I believe, Cantonese, Mandarin, and Fukienese. So we're going to have people right here in this unit that are dedicated to hate crime that can do this work and deal with a lot of our Asian victims.
Excellent.
Doug?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say how proud I am and want to congratulate my fellow board members and the co-chairs of HHS to put together this, what was referred to as an A-team. It makes me very, very proud. This is one of the most important things happening in our community and in the country. So I'm so proud. My question is really kind of a simple legal one. I wanted to understand how hate crimes are defined in terms of the protected classes. We have federal protected classes. There's 7. Then I heard 10 mentioned. So number one, I wanted to know, does it parody specifically the federal protected classes, or do we have expanded protected classes within New York State or New York City? And are there any additional protected classes that we should be considering advocating to include? And that, I guess that's more of a legal question, and I open it up to whomever would like to answer.
I know that we have 10 classes. Do you want me to name them again, or are you know what they are? I mean, do you want me to go over them again? It's race, color, national origin, ancestry, gender, religion, religious practice, age, disability, or sexual orientation. So those are our 10 classes. people have kicked around different things about what should be protected. Now, if you notice, transgender is not listed in this list. However, we treat transgender under gender. So we protect the trans folks in the current statute, the way it's worded right now, even though it's not specifically listed. Some people think that homeless folks should be included in this. Some people think like political affiliation should be a part of this. In DC, political affiliation is part of their hate crime statute. It is not part of ours. So a lot of what you might have seen a year ago with the Black Lives Matter murals, like that were painted on Fifth Avenue and in various places, were politically motivated crimes as opposed to race motivated crimes. So people have, kicked around different ideas. Some people think that police officers could be included in these protected categories, but this is what we have right now.
So that, just following that list of 10 is not necessarily consistent with federal.
That's correct.
Is the federal is 7 and we have 10? Is that correct?
I'm not sure. Just Charlie, do you know? I don't know.
Well, as long as we know which 10 are here within this jurisdiction, and again, if there are any other protected classes that we as a community should consider including and advocating for, I'd love to know that at some point.
Our law is more expansive than the federal law. That I do know. And I have spoken to my colleagues at the Southern District about, like, for example, we had a case a couple years ago where there was almost like a trespass at the African burial grounds down by the courthouses. And it didn't constitute a crime for us, but they were able to charge it because it was on federal property. So, but for the most part, our law is more expansive than theirs. So we generally take the lead on these cases in Manhattan.
Yeah, I would also add, it's interesting in New York State, the etching of a swastika or the display of a noose or a burning cross is considered a hate crime. That's not true of many states. So when we look at the numbers of incidents, some of them are when we were looking at the anti-Semitic incidents, a huge percentage of them were actually driven by the swastika incidents. I think it was last year was about 76% of those incidents. So I think that's unique to New York. I had never seen that in other states in terms of, usually someone would just say it's just graffiti, but here in New York, it is subject to enhanced penalties.
And may I also add, if we were to come across something where we can't charge, as to Jeannie's point, that we work with our U.S. attorneys, Southern Eastern District, we speak with the Department of Justice, we work with the FBI, so we can look at other charges that might be applicable if we don't have something that we can charge, or that they may be able to charge something in addition to what we charge.
If I can just comment that some hateful symbols in certain cultures are not hateful symbols. The swastika also appears in Buddhist and other religious cultures. So we have to be aware that although when you see something like that, you assume that certain things, you have to know the background of the person and what motivated them, in fairness.
Right. No, and that's an important point. The way the statute is written recognizes that, because it says with the deliberate intent to intimidate. So, yeah.
So, Shelley, we have Natasha has one more comment, and then I can tell you who in the public wants to speak.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just have a follow-up to my earlier question. I didn't hear from NYPD or anybody from law enforcement about their budgets for hate crimes in particular. What's happened in the last 1 year 16 months to their budget specifically for this mission? Thank you.
I mean, I'll just say that having grown up, I mean, I've been in the office since 1987, so I'm thankful that I have a working Xerox machine most of the time. But you know, and so of course we could always use more money, but I don't really know. I can't talk about the budget, you know, but so I really can't speak to that. But we make it work. I mean, we follow the law. We work with the NYPD. We try to do the right thing in our cases, and we just try to make it work with what we have for the most part. I mean, I know that money and more money can give us more things, but we just try to make it work with what we have.
Yes, and thank you for that.
Okay, so who do we have?
The first person who signed up from the public is Marie Desolette. Sorry for mispronouncing names. I really apologize. Marie Desolette.
Oh, here we are.
Give me 1 second. I will. Rosa, did you promote that person?
I think I am. Yeah.
Are you there? Great. Okay.
I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for this. This is something that's very interesting, especially for the Upper West Side. As you know, we have quite a large Jewish community, and they do experience, if it's not hate crime, an awful lot of hate. I don't know, hate intimidation. I don't know what it is, how to word it. But I was quite concerned because I do look at the stats very regularly of the crime on the Upper West Side and of the city. And the stats are really not showing that, there's a lot more crime taking place when it comes to hate crime than in the previous years. There's a lot more attention to it. Is there a reason why the hate crime is not showing up in the stats? And I have a follow-up question to this as well, is verbal assault. At what point does it become criminal intimidation? Like, is there a point? What is when is it a crime? Because it seems like we accept so much intimidation on the Upper West Side in so many ways, the Jewish community for sure, but as a woman and my teenage daughter, we are intimidated regularly by, people on the streets, but that's another category, I guess, of hate crime against women and against teenagers. I don't know where that fits, but I must say the Upper West Side has become a very uncomfortable neighborhood for many, and especially for our Jewish community. And it's a shame that tonight's meeting really is so close to Passover. Many of our Jewish neighbors are actually so busy with Passover. I don't think that this particular meeting made it onto their radar. So hopefully we can have a different type of meeting where we help them understand what hate crime is, what they need to report, and at what point does, again, intimidation become criminal?
Okay, so your question was, why doesn't the hate crime statistics reflect what you feel is happening? I think, is that correct?
Yes, and I think what everybody's talking about, if everybody's talking about hate crime, there must be because there's more, and somehow we don't see it. And also, especially the point where does intimidation become a crime?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm happy to start, and I think any of us probably could address it in terms, and I wish CCHR was able to be here because they usually can talk about the bias incidents. The intimidation, unless there really is a threat, a real threat that they're going to do something physically to attack you, just verbally saying something to you is just not actionable. I think Jean Oliva addressed that at the beginning of her presentation. Listen, you have a right to be a bigot in this country, and unfortunately, hurtful things are said on the street way too often, but they cannot be prosecuted as hate crimes unless somebody actually says, I'm going to hit you, or does something more aggressive that crosses the line into actual threat. So it's a hard one. I know I saw some questions in the panel just about if you go into a restaurant and said, you're denied service. This is where the City Commission on Human Rights they have authority over civil complaints. Just because something may not rise to the level of criminality does not mean in New York that you're not protected under human rights law. And so there are things that can be done, and the CCHR is the agency in the city that can support people. So if you're not even sure if it crossed the line or not, you can just contact City Commission on Human Rights, and one of their legal experts can walk you through what your remedies could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
in terms of the stats, I don't know which stats you're looking at. I don't know if NYPD wants to address it, but as we said, last year, the stats were way down in terms of hate crimes. There was a 37% reduction overall. Again, we believe because of the pandemic and people not interacting as much.
But yeah, the stats this year overall for the city as of March 8th are showing minus 53% year over year.
Right.
And on the Upper West Side, it's zero.
Right.
It's at
again, the exception.
one.
The exception is the anti-Asian ones are the ones that really have us focused now because of that sharp increase in what's happening in that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I can just jump in for 1 minute, what you're really speaking to, though, it sounds like, is the behaviors that don't rise to the level of a crime, and how that's happening almost constantly when, you know, your daughter's walking down the street, or if you go into a restaurant. And it seems to me, I mean, that's what struck me when we were sort of talking about planning this forum with CB7. You know, you've got hateful words in the chat. You've got, you know, Zoom bombs happening with kids in their classrooms. Like, this is happening so often, and it's not a crime. And so you could almost have a whole forum or a whole hour or more just talking about how to deal with that, you know, individually, how to deal with, what do you do when it happens in a chat? And I agree with Deborah that having, you know, the other agency that wasn't able to make it here tonight, maybe having that as a follow-up with them to talk about what do you do with that when this behavior is not a crime. Because that seems what you're more focused on in terms of what you're seeing on a regular basis on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, and it would be wonderful if the NYPD was trained in referring these individuals to the other agency, because right now some people are just being told, oh, don't bother, we can't report that. And that's kind of difficult for these people, because all of a sudden everybody's feeling like what's happening to them doesn't matter anymore.
So maybe a campaign also geared towards, you know, whatever the word would be, not hate crime, but hateful behavior. What do you do when you're experiencing that? What can you do, and how do we support each other through that? Is a topic in and of itself. Whereas this particular forum was really focused on what is a hate crime? When does something rise to the level of a hate crime? And I think that it was a really, you know, all of the panelists did such a good job in helping to see that. But there's a lot more to talk about on incidents that don't rise to the level of a crime.
So just to add to that, you can report something that occurs where if somebody is harassing you and makes you feel uncomfortable and makes statements to you, whether they're hateful based on the protected classes, or just somebody makes you feel uncomfortable with hateful statements that are not on protected classes, you can certainly make a report for harassment. But what normally happens in those cases is, because it's not a crime, it's a violation, harassment, it would get closed and not investigated. But it could be a pattern of something that occurs that maybe now it continues and now it rises to another level at some point.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing so much in the press right now about the anti-Asian incidents, and the number that keeps being publicized by the AAPI Stop Hate is close to 4,000 incidents nationally. A small percentage of those are actual assaults or whatnot. Most of them are verbal assaults. And I think it's a combination, which I think is incredibly healthy, that the Asian American Pacific Islander community now is feeling more confident in reporting those incidents. So you have we sort of have this situation where they weren't reporting at all for some cultural reasons. And now there's a lot more emphasis on them speaking out and reporting that they've been, you know, the subject of verbal abuse and others. So The paradox of the work that we all do on this forum is that if we're doing a really good job, the numbers are actually going to go up on those charts because people are going to feel more confident in reporting these incidents. So, then we're going to get everyone saying, well, why is hate crime up? But in fact, the reporting is up. It's actually a healthy thing, I believe, for democracy, that people have that confidence and the trust relationship with law enforcement to come forward and report.
Go ahead, Jessica, please.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add that we're seeing some instances now where people, and I've actually heard some politicians at places that I've been where they've told people to try to film what's happening or take pictures. And I just want to remind everyone to please, if you're going to do that, you have to do it safely. Because the number one thing is that no one gets hurt, no one is injured. And we're seeing some confrontational situations occurring when people are trying to now follow the person who was making the hate speech and videotape them or take pictures of them. So we just want people to be careful because paramount is personal safety, number one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, good. Next.
Yep, so the next person who signed up to speak is June Hyun.
I don't see that person in the list, on the list of attendees anymore. Do you, Rosa?
I don't.
Okay, the person after that is SG Williams, and I don't know if she's here. She submitted a question. Is SG Williams here?
I just promoted her. If she's ready to talk, she should be unmuted.
Yeah, she's here, apparently.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Esty.
Hi. What a great forum tonight. And thank you to Shelley and Catherine for organizing. My question is, earlier we had, someone had discussed the development of some new curricula for school use, educating students on hate crimes. And I was wondering if these curricula are in use already, and if so, if we could somehow access it online. I'd be very curious to look at them myself and possibly even show them to my family. My other question is whether or not they'll be mandatory in our schools. Thank you.
Hi, Esty, this is Deborah. Yeah, the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crime we're now creating the curriculum. It won't be ready for rollout until fall. And so as much as I'd love to share it with you, it's going to have to wait a few more months. It's under development, takes a lot of just back end work. We're trying to make it so it's good for, in case, God forbid, there's kids are still learning virtually, but we're doing all kinds of components. So at this point, I don't believe it will be mandatory. But it'll be strongly encouraged. So we'll work closely with the Department of Education, do teacher training so that they're comfortable with the material and, really push it. So I'm optimistic about it and I'm real proud of the work we're doing in the space. So I'm glad to hear you're interested and want to share it. So wait for fall.
And I'll just add that in the meantime, our office does provide educational programming in the schools, and we're available to bring assistant district attorneys and members of the community partnerships unit out to schools to talk about bias and hate crimes. And we're actively doing that now. Our team is going to be meeting with Deborah's team to kind of learn from each other on how we can all do this in the best possible way. But for now, if anybody's interested, we have that available both virtually and in person to do presentations in schools.
Great.
So, and I just want to say that I think as a board, we should think about potential connections to education. Courtney, you're here, right?
Yeah.
There's so much talk about education, and that's a great opportunity. And I know that Mark has a lot of connections to the CEC, the Community Education Council. So that's just an option. It's so great to hear about so many opportunities education about this in local schools, and the schools in our district are so engaged. So I just want to throw that out there. I don't know, Courtney, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think it's actually a really interesting point. I think at this point, my argument would be, let's just make sure we stay in touch so that we can, the key here is planning. Our schools have a lot to plan for right now, but I think it'd be great to circle back once we kind of have a sense of where they are and make sure that our schools and our contacts there are looped in so that we can transition that content as quickly as possible.
And I don't know if I mentioned this, but when I brought up Courtney, but she's the co-chair of youth education on CB7. So we have one more.
Catherine, could I just jump in real quick on that for a very quick point? Sure. This year is a year in which the election of community education council members is taking place. And for the first time under mayoral control, all parents get to vote instead of just the PTA president, treasurer, and secretary. So there are candidate statements out there. You may, following up on what you were saying, folks who are voters may very well want to think about those issues and how the candidates line up on those issues when casting their votes.
Great point. Thank you. So we have one more speaker?
Yes, we have Theodore Spiegel, and then after we wrap up the hate crimes forum, I just noticed in the chat that we have another question from.
I think we may have lost Ted Spiegel, although Shelley addressed some of his questions earlier, but.
I'm here. Here I am.
Oh, you are? Great. Sorry.
Very quickly, a great panel. Thank you. My advertising campaign is addressed to those who would commit the hate crimes. And if there's a 5D, could be put on a 5 inches by 10 inches and put on through the MTA, the subway ads, the buses, the Long Island Railroad. It says, report hate crimes, call 911. If it's the health department could put it next to every Heimlich maneuver poster in a restaurant. However, it could be put out, whether it's a sticker on every lamppost or the Amber Alert system with the electronic road signs to report a hate crime, report a bias incident, call 911 with the 5 Ds somehow. Also on the front of every school or on the school bulletin boards, report a hate crime, call 911. Just so it's seen wherever you go in the city, every 2 or 3 blocks, there's a recognition that somebody's going to get caught. So that's in the prevention. Just as many places as you could put it. That was my 2 cents to, if you were running for an office, you'd see that everywhere. This would be to stop a hate crime, stop a bias incident with 5 Ds, with the appropriate who to call, what to do. And that's
okay.
That I don't know who would be responsible for that, with the Office of Prevention of Hate Crimes, or who would want to take that, but it's there for anyone to take and run with. And thank you very much for allowing me to
Sure. Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Shelley. Thank you. Wish you all good health and success.
So I think that's the last speaker from the public. I want to emphatically thank all the presenters for being here with us and educating us. Thank you so much. You're so needed, and we really value and appreciate the work that you're doing. And we learned so much tonight, and we'll definitely follow up. Shelley, you probably have a few words to say as well.
Yeah, I think that this became more of a timely issue than when we started working on it. I think the foundation was the hate crimes resolution from the board, and it's a springboard. It was a springboard for us to reach out to the agencies who were so cooperative, and we appreciate it so much. Very often when you contact city agencies, you get a feeling like you're bothering them. And here we got only positive, how can we work together? This is what we do. This is what we can do. What do you need? And that resulted in this forum tonight. And our hearts are full with appreciation to them and to everybody who attended. The important thing, I think we should go and in our individual lives with family, friends, and community, spread the information that we have. We're going to try to put some of the information on our website, particularly information that would be concise enough that people would get, would pay attention to it at the same time that it would be rich enough to help people understand. So we thank you all.
Yes, and I don't know if any of you have any final thoughts. You definitely don't have to stay for the rest of our meeting. We have one more item on the agenda. Thank you so much for being here.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. You guys are doing great work, and we salute you for bringing attention to this. And for those of you who do celebrate, happy Passover. And I'm about to go cook my brisket from Fisher Brothers. So,
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the last item on the agenda for HHS members is that next month we are planning to focus on mental health. So if you have any ideas, we have collected ideas over the past few months as this has come up. But if you have any ideas, please email us. And Courtney, we definitely want to build on the work of your committee in a way that's useful. And so any thoughts, ideas, please email either the whole committee or Shelley and me. And we'll put together hopefully something useful for next month. Any thoughts on that? Anything you want to add, Shelley?
No, I'm so glad we're not going any longer, okay? Because I think things were beautiful, and sometimes when things come together, that's the time to say goodnight.
Great job, Shelley and Catherine.
Thanks everybody for your help.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay. No one wants to leave. Okay, motion to adjourn.